carried this this profound feeling around for a while after watching this documentary. You know, like this feeling that we're all a product of and under the authority of whatever it was that originated the universe, the creation, and the clear patterns and order, wisdom and intelligence that brought it into being. Also, at that time, I was becoming aware of symbolism that I noticed in many corners of the music industry. When I traced them back, they were related to things pertaining to like the occult, mystery religions, as they call it. So before this point, I never thought of anything like this. It would seem kind of like hocus pocus, let's say. But looking at them and noticing a correlation between a lot of these artists and the messages that they delivered in their music, I saw that this was something that a lot of artists were actually connected to. The messages were always kind of related to, for example, you only live once, live for the day, do what thou wilt. Do what thou wilt is a famous statement of one of the most, they called him, I think, the wickedest man in the world, Aleister Crowley, who was a very famous occultist and English aristocrat, who was very influential. And even in the music scene, music industry, the amount of artists that he influenced through his teachings, basically this statement, do what thou wilt, he mentions that it was inspired to him by a shaitan, by a demon in Egypt during rituals that he would be involved with, like sexual magic. They called it sex magic. And this was a school of magic originating in Alexandria in Egypt that goes back thousands of years. He was involved with this, and also with the occult in England and Scotland. Anyway, the Beatles were really influenced by him. John Lennon, many artists, even Jay-Z, you see it written on his T-shirt, "Do what thou wilt." You know, so there's this kind of veneration of Aleister Crowley with many musicians, and this is also the term YOLO, which is the modern derivation of "do what thou wilt." It's the same thing. Even this idea of do whatever you want as long as you don't harm anyone. These principles all go back to the same source. This is J.S. Mill, a post-Enlightenment philosopher. You know, the harm principle, that everyone should have the freedom and the autonomy to do whatever they want as long as they don't harm anyone. You know, this is liberalism. This is philosophical liberalism, the ayn of philosophical liberalism, the heart of it. So if you're Aleister Crowley, J.S. Mill, Foucault, or Shaitan, the message is the same. I realized that some of my favorite artists were promoting this symbolism and paying homage to these messages. And this became strange and weird to me when I was looking at this stuff. But I saw that it was a reality, that, you know, they were involved in this thing, and they were paying homage to this. It was particularly strange because one of my favorite artists at the time, D'Angelo, and his album Voodoo, like this was like literally, as a musician at that time, this was the pinnacle of what I thought real music was, you know, in the lyrics and the content and everything. But after researching these things and then starting to listen to actually what he was saying, I realized how dark his message was. And also considering that he actually, before he did this album, he went to Haiti to perform various voodoo rituals, sacrificing to the shayateen and to the, you know, the ancestors, as they call them. But it was the same thing. Anyway, it was, you know, his life fell apart basically after this album went viral, critically acclaimed. You know, his life fell apart. Many non-Muslims listening to this will find this a bunch of nonsense, you know, as I once did. But, you know, there's things that we can relate this to that we take for granted and that we don't think is hocus pocus, but it's in the same realm, that which cannot be proven through the scientific method, through physical processes in a science lab. A simple example is dreams. It's a reality outside of consciousness that we have all experienced. Events in dreams cannot be proven using science. All that can be proven is the sign of the dream, or the sign that someone is having a dream, for example, electrical signals. So we all believe in the reality of dreams regardless, although we can't physically capture them in a test tube or in a lab. It's just testimony. It's based on testimony. It transcends race, it transcends culture. Another example, the jinn, the non-Muslim would say, like an unseen being or supernatural, the ghost, poltergeist. We Muslims believe in the jinn. And this is a phenomenon which is cross-cultural, cross-racial. Every corner of the world has believed in this phenomenon and has it physically experienced it from the time that humanity walked this earth. We know that the jinn, this being, which has free will, which we cannot see, this is something that we Muslims, we have iman, we believe in. It's mentioned in the Quran and the Hadith, and it's mentioned, as I said, cross-culturally. This is related to the occult and magic, not magic like tricks of hands, or illusionary tricks, but the magic wherein a contract is made between an individual doing various rituals and acts, coming in contact with this jinn, and a relationship forms. This is something we know and we believe in as Muslims, and it is the testimony is, as we say, mutawatir, is in Arabic this means multiple chains of narration. Basically, in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that if you were to disbelieve in the jinn, it's not really different from disbelieving in the phenomenon of dreams. Researching the occult made me aware of these cross-cultural practices that people engaged in, which they claimed brought them in contact with the jinn, with the unseen, by doing the vilest of actions. If you were to research into this, you'd see that this basically works in the same way in every locality on the planet. As one student of knowledge, he put it, that sihr, or magic, as we call it, it's one religion worldwide. It's one religion. It works in the same way. Whether it's village occult magic in Devon or Cornwall, or jadoo in Indonesia, whether it's shamanism in Siberia, voodoo in the Caribbean, West Africa, the practice of the Agora, Hindus, extreme Hindus in India, or the sexual magic of Alexandria, for example, it all works in the same way. People give an offering or do an act of worship to the ancestors or the spirits. The jinn is the reality of actually what these things are. They beat some drums, dance, become intoxicated, sometimes commit sexual acts, like in Haiti, the voodoo in Haiti, which comes from West Africa originally. It's intoxication, drums, offerings, and sexual actions, just like with Aleister Crowley. And this is magic that was performed by, for example, different groups in England throughout history, even pre-Christian times. And these people, they claim that they draw energy from this, and they get some knowledge of the unseen and the future and XYZ. A lot of it is actually lies, but there is this principle of working with the supernatural at its foundation. And you'll find that these are sciences that are written down in books going back thousands of years. So in relation, music, rhythm, sex, intoxicants, these are all intrinsically part of the occult and other shamanistic traditions as well, which is why so many artists have become throughout history involved in this. Rappers, soul musicians, rock bands, jazz musicians. A lot of jazz music from the 60s was very dark. Miles Davis, John Coltrane, even classical composers were involved in the occult. Obviously, I'm not saying this is true for all musicians, because I was a musician for years and I wasn't involved in that. But it's definitely there. and especially amongst some of the biggest selling artists. In fact, in one tour, a well-known rapper from London at that time, during his set, we were supporting him. And I saw all of this, the VJ that was putting all this symbolism on the background display. This is after I've been looking into it, so I literally saw it in front of my eyes. And it was like a ritual, taking place, and he was chanting to the audience, like, the lights went down, the symbolism came on the board. He got everyone to kind of go low, and he was basically saying stuff like, you can be whatever you want to be. We've only got one life. Take your destiny into your own hands. The message was basically, do what thou wilt. It was basically Aleister Crowley, 100%. And I remember I stood at the back and I said to the bass player in my band, this is some like occult stuff. This is some Masonic stuff, and he laughed at me. He was like I was crazy.